Episode 1 of Shadow and Bone begins with an introduction to a young woman named Alina. She lives in East Ravka and is en route to the Shadow Fold. Alongside a group of other cartographers, she packs up her things and prepares to head out. The Fold is a strange, ethereal realm that divides up the different countries in this world. In the past it consumed her parents, leaving her an orphan. Now she's with the First Army. Stepping out the carriage, Alina and the boys are faced with the impending wall of doom before them. While they're all taken aback by its breathtaking enormity, they comment how Mal is the only one who probably wouldn't be afraid. Mal is Alina's best friend, and someone she's known since childhood. We first meet Mal fighting with another boy. He easily dispatches his foe, but finds far tougher competition ahead. A man conjuring magic entices him to fight back. Mal knows how to pick his battles, though, and walks away. When he does, he meets back up with Alina. The camp is abuzz with the First Army, as super-powered soldiers known as Grisha harness their powers to use against straw dummies. It doesn't take long before Alina and Mal attend a briefing. There's a perilous journey needed across the Fold, fronted by Sergeant Yuri Teplov. Unfortunately, Mal is selected as part of this nightmare lottery. That evening, Mal is approached by a squalor girl called Zoya. She tries to convince him to bunk up for the night, but he walks away. His fear for this Grisha is well hidden, but something he admits to Alina later that evening. That's not the only thing he's scared of though, especially with the Fold rising up ominously before then. In Ketterdam, island of Kerch, counterfeit coins are caught out by a fellow trickster known as Jesper. His boss Kaz arrives and warns him, telling the boy he needs to head back on the door. Upstairs, Kaz is greeted by Inij, who feeds back news of a big job, one worth 1,000,000 kruj no less. A wealthy merchant named Reeson is the payer, and he wants to send a group through the Fold. As fate would have it, Dressen is after a Hirtrander, but given the riches on offer, Kaz isn't the only one interested. A rival gang known as the Dime Lions also rise up, fronted by Pekka Rollins. In the morning, the Black General, known as Kirigan, shows up in camp. He's looking to oversee the operation, but Alina is having doubts. She burns a whole stack of maps, making sure to erase records of what's on the other side of the Fold. The officers are not happy, and eventually this sees Alina and her entire crew volunteering to redraw the maps. This means they can board the same ship as Mal. On board the skiff, the group lurch into the black jaws of death, plunging into the Fold and what lies beyond. Thunder rumbles in the distance, while lightning strokes the dim outline of something. When an officer on board lights a lantern, it serves as a homing beacon for these winged beasts, known simply as Volcra. Mal is injured in the ensuing skirmish, prompting Alina to grab a gun and shoot the creature as it holds on to his body. The damage has been done though, and Mal tells her he'll meet her at the meadow. This winged beast grabs Alina from behind, prompting a bright flash of light to illuminate them all. On the other side of the rift lies West Ravka. The general stands with his troops, awaiting the crew of Alina's ship to disembark. One survivor called Alexei stumbles out the shadowy curtain, stumbling across the beach and collapsing on the ground. Meanwhile, Kaz shows up with his Hirtrander, Milana, ready to take Dressen's job. As we now come to see, these two timelines we've been following have been cleverly interwoven. The attack on Alina and Mal's ship occurred 2 weeks prior to Kaz and the gang's story. While Alexei finds himself in West Ravka, Mal and Alina show up by the dock, bloodstained but still very much alive. Anyway, Alexei's being kept with Dressen, and now we hear what happened. An event occurred within the Fold, that flash of white light, and a device detonated. This device is actually a sun summoner, which seems to be what Alina actually is. Anyway, Alexei is killed after giving over Alina's name, setting up a new mission for Kaz. He needs to bring Alina to Dressen. If not, he's going to give the job to Pekka. Episode 2 of Shadow and Bone begins in the past as we see a key scene from Mal and Alina's past. In fact, this repeated motif plays an important role in what's to follow this season. Anyway, Mal and Alina decide against being tested to see if the other is a Grisha or not. Instead, they race outside and lie together in the fields. This leads us along nicely to the present as cacophonous shouting prompts healers to race on board Alina's ship and take her and Mal away. Meanwhile, Inage pleads with Kaz to see reason. With 6 hours left to find Alina, Inage is getting cold feet and is seriously considering walking away. Kaz is left pondering what step to take next. Unfortunately, that's made a lot harder when Pekka finds Kaz and threatens him. Inage meanwhile gets talking to Jesper down in the bar. However, she's summoned away after admitting grimly that Kaz is blinded by his rage. Alina is taken to General Kirigan, where a hush descends over the tent. He demands to know what she is, hinting toward the Sun Summoner quip mentioned by Alexei last episode on the other side of the fold. The truth soon comes tumbling out though, as Kirigan finds out she can summon light. With a ring in hand, he approaches her to see if she's really that powerful Grisha. While Alina struggles to control her nerves, Mal races up to the tent. He's held back though, helpless as a blinding light pierces Kirigan's quarters and descends to the sky. Now it becomes clear that she's the Sun Summoner and a powerful weapon for the army to use. She's taken away from Mal and en route on a carriage to Alta, the capital city of Ravka. On the other side of the fold, Kaz stumbles upon his way out, a man known simply as the conductor. Meanwhile, Inage is given a way out from her predicament. Before working for Brecker, she belonged to a brothel run by Tante Helene. Kaz still has 5 more installments to pay off to free Inage from her slavery. Technically, this means she still belongs to Helene. Anyway, this woman won't let her go across the fold until her debt is paid. In order to do that, she gives Inage a target to kill. If she can kill this man that night, then her debt will be cleared. According to Helene, this target is also a dangerous man like Kaz. Inage immediately heads off to see Jesper, trying to pass on her job to him. He refuses though, but does agree to help her out. Meanwhile, Alina's carriage is attacked out on the road. Here we get to see the Grisha fight fist hand, with an impressive barrage of different skills against conventional gunfire. Smoke bombs are thrown their way, choking the atmosphere and clouding the battlefield. Alina is attacked by a bandit, but thankfully a Darkling shows up and saves her. As fate would have it, Kirigan is this Darkling, and he happens to be one of the Grisha. He grabs Alina and encourages her to ride with him on to the little palace. They have to stop midway though, as Alina claims her tailbone is hurting. It's a small touch, but one that adds an air of authenticity to this fantasy series. While catching their breath, we learn more about the attack. The men and women were Driscoll, elite members of the Fjordan military, and trained to hunt down and kill anyone who may be Grisha. Kirigan believes she could be this world's chosen summoner, and that gives the Fjordan more than a reason to go after her. This Sun Summoner we've been hearing about is apparently prophesied to enter the fold and destroy it from the inside out. Although Kirigan calls it a gift, Alina bites back, claiming her powers are a curse. Alina tells him she's alone, but the general reassures her, reminding the girl that she's not anymore. Back at camp, news of Alina's attack reaches them all. Mal is not happy and wants to find her. Unfortunately, the sergeant doesn't see it that way and likens her to being disposable. Back in West Ravka, Kaz arrives to find Poppy. Kaz outright asks about the conductor and warns that Tante and Pekka are certainly not of the forgiving kind. Only, now it becomes clear that the conductor is exactly who Inage has been told to kill. This news causes Inage to hesitate. The conductor claims not to be involved in any of this business and admits that he's actually a liberator. He's not involved with the White Rose, but does offer some help. Eventually Inage loses her patience and comes at him with a knife. Kaz suddenly appears and breaks the news. This man is their ticket to finding Alina. Helene knew this and was using Inage all this time. After saving him, Kaz asks the conductor to break them inside the little palace. For now, Kaz approaches Helene and tells her she's taking Inage with him. Handing over a sealed envelope, the contents inside hold a letter to the Crow Club. Helene agrees to the terms and tells him that Inage is his to. Episode 3 of Shadow and Bone begins with Alina awakening after a bad dream. Within this she sees a mythical stag with large antlers, eclipsed by a large ball of brilliant light. Waking up, she finds herself at the whim of a whole host of attendants and servants who tend to her. Arina is going to meet the king, but before that she's healed of her wounds, thanks to a Grisha healer called Genya. Alina is taken down to see the King Pieter, complete with a First Army uniform and a gold veil. Among those in attendance is the king's apparat and the crown prince too. Kirigan shows up and confirms that the king will almost certainly keep her there for training. In front of the king, Alina manages to conjure forth her brilliant powers, dazzling the throne room in a mesmerizing light show. On the back of this, Kirigan makes his case. He tells the royal family that he's going to train Irina and harness the girl's powers. His plan involves destroying the fold. The king's stake in all this is bringing the entire world together. Training begins and Irina is immediately knocked down by Zoya, the woman she chooses to do combat with. Alina is knocked back repeatedly, and eventually this sees training come to an abrupt end for the day. Alina heads to the library where we learn a little more about the prophetic fate of this world. It turns out the first recorded Grisha is a man known as the Bonesmith. Apparently he made creatures from his own finger bones, which were later revealed to be mythical animals. It seems like there are 4 main creatures, if the images in the book we're shown are anything to go by, and one of those is a deer. With a book in hand, Alina meets Bagra, who's known to harness one's power. Sitting opposite her, Bagra casts seeds of doubt in Alina's mind. Bagra tells her she needs to believe in herself and come back when she does. Angry and disappointed, Alina begins writing to Mal. We then skip across to Novokrobursk and West Ravka. Kaz, Inij, Jesper and the conductor team up together to find a Hirtrander called Nina. Only, they're not alone. The Driscoll are also after Nina, and through a slick interwoven flashback, our Hirtrander is taken away by these witchhunters. The group split up, with each needing to find a crucial tool to cross the fold and bring Nina back. Unfortunately, Jesper gets sidetracked and starts gambling. Kaz meanwhile obtains the goat he needs and reminds Inij that she needs to stay focused. As he so eloquently puts it, we all have debts to pay. The group show up at the abandoned train ready to go. Unfortunately, Jesper's gambling mishaps mean they're down on coal and may not have enough to cross. Still, the group team up together and prepare to go. The conductor rolls up his sleeve to show a number of deep carvings. These mark the number of crossings he's made to the other side. As the train gets moving, they draw near to a Volcra nest. The winged beasts immediately attack. With things looking bleak, Jesper of all people stands up and shows off his gunslinging abilities, all whilst holding the goat. Thankfully, it's enough to bring them through to the other side, where our characters breathe a sigh of relief. Episode 4 of Shadow and Bone cleverly splits its story into several different strands, with Alina and Mal both longing for letters from the other. Our story picks up several weeks after the events of the previous episodes. Mal has been sent to Chernist, where the Fjordans keep attacking at night. His attempts to write to the little palace are in vain, and Mal receives no word back from Alina either. General Kirigan has tasked a number of different units to go off in search of the mythical Morozova stag. Seeing this as his route back to Alina, Mal volunteers for the tracking party. He's not alone though, and both Mikkel and Dubrov agree to go with him. Alina and Alexander Kirigan continue to grow closer together, with the latter understanding her power struggle. Together, they reflect on the history of the fold and how it came to be. Hundreds of years back, King Anastas hired a Grisha as a military advisor. Unfortunately, this heretic decided to use forbidden science to create an army. In doing so, he also made the fold and was killed, along with countless others. The solution to all this is Alina, who is prophesied to use her powers to destroy the fold once and for all. If she can't complete her task, well, she could end up just like that heretic. No pressure. This inevitably brings Alina back to Bagra for training. It's pretty unconventional teaching, complete with slaps and threats. It's not nearly enough to bring Alina true power out, but it is at least a start. Bagra next spikes the girl's tea, making Alina see visions of her time at the orphanage, and specifically the day of the testing. Meanwhile in Kribersk, East Ravka, Jesper and the gang reflect on their journey through the Shadow Fold and what comes next. They're planning a heist on the royal archives, and this means a touching goodbye with Milo, the goat. Anyway, the group eventually head in with Kaz posing as a sculptor. He gains the dimensions to the front entrance, prompting Inij to dive in from the rooftop. While she copies the schematics, Jesper blends in with the guards. Reconvening at the bar, the conductor brings forth Marco, a man who happens to be part of a performing troupe who have lost their star performer, sabotaged by the conductor himself. This could give them away inside the little palace if Inage lends them her unique talents to the cause. Jesper too uses his gunslinging abilities, while Kaz formulates his own way inside. While all this is going on, Matthias confronts his Hirtrander prisoner and tries to feed Nina. He wants information on the Darkling, something Nina is not willing to give up. However, the ship hits some serious choppy waters later that night, as Nina remains chained to the rafters. Meanwhile, Mal, Dubrov and Mikkel are attacked out in the frosty waste. With a machine gunner lying in the woods, blasts rain down across the forest as Mal drops to the ground. When he awakens, both of his friends have been killed. Crawling across the frozen land, he takes out the guards and eventually mourns for his fallen friends. In the distance, the mythical stag steps out into the light. As he looks on in shock, we cut across to Alina, who has Genya erase her childhood scar from her hand. Episode 5 of Shadow and Bone begins with the ominous sound of bells tolling. We're on the outskirts of Chernist, deep in the First Army's camp. Clutching his stomach, Mal stumbles into town, alone. The soldiers snatch him up and help him back to camp. Meanwhile, Kaz and the gang are allowed into the little palace, but are under strict instructions from the guards. Inside the walls, Alina embraces her new role, seeing herself as part of the Grisha. Tellingly, she decides to adopt a black outfit too. Genya warns her to be careful of powerful men. Speaking of which, David Kostic, expert resident fabricator, shows up and introduces himself to Alina. It's clear Genya has a soft spot for him, bidding David farewell as he leaves the room. With the performance upcoming, this is exactly when Kaz and his team will strike. Kaz poses as a guard and begins looking around the palace, trying to find a point to grab Alina. Well, Alina is restless, and she intends to head out to check on the festivities in town. There's a big show going on, with the Cirque troupe putting on a performance depicting Alina as the Sun Summoner. Alina is certainly amused and intends to make her presence known until Genya stops her. However, Jesper happens to be overhearing from afar and comments on the situation. As a group, they set up a Lynx flush, a fancy way of saying the conductor is grabbing the summoner, while the others slide in to break out as quickly as possible. Back inside the little palace, Kirigan and Alina continue to grow closer together. In fact, Alina even kisses the general, surprising him further. This sets the scene for that evening to follow, as surprises are afoot. Jesper and the stable hand end up kissing in the barn, while Kaz puts his plan to snatch up Alina into action. Before that, Alina dazzles the crowd with a stunning light show, an awesome display of power. While she entertains the masses, Kaz and the group come up against an unexpected wildcard. That comes in the form of Mal, who arrives at Little Palace looking for General Kirigan. He's led into the palace, feeding back to Kirigan that he's found the stag. Kirigan demands he mark it on the map, but Mal refuses. Instead, he tells the general he wants to see Alina first. In exchange for this, he'll disclose the location of the stag precisely. News of this spreads to Bagra, but she's aghast when she hears the general is on the hunt. Alina tries to outsmart Kaz and the group with a doppelganger, but Kaz has already seen through this. What he hasn't seen through, however, is General Kirigan arriving and grabbing Alina, showing her the blue iris flowers to help woo her. Mal is ambushed by one of the guards, who tries to assassinate the First Army soldier. Toffen has already been slaughtered, but Mal manages to fend off his foe and survive. After kissing Kirigan in the study, he's taken away with news of Marie's death. Bagra shows up and whisks the Sun Summoner away through a secret passageway. There, she breaks the news that Kirigan is just using her. In fact, he intends to expand the fold and use it as a weapon. He's also the Black Heretic and Bagra happens to be his mother. Kirigan has been hunting the legendary animals all this time, and Alina almost gave him the stag. While she takes off through twisty corridors in the back, Kirigan confronts his mother out in the courtyard. Mal takes off too, while Alina hides inside a trunk in a carriage outside. The very same carriage, as it turns out, Jesper and the others are in possession of. They hop on board and take off, unwittingly having completed their mission after. Episode 6 of Shadow and Bone begins with Yora and Kirigan in the basement, interrogating the conductor, Arkan. Unfortunately, one of his guards, Ivan, happens to be a Grisha and he consents that the man is lying. Interestingly, Nina too was lying. Apparently she was a spy planted by Kirigan. Only, that plan went awry on account of her being taken by the Witchhunters. Now that she's gone missing, Kirigan suspects that he's involved. Eventually he loses his patience and Kirigan has the man killed. Kirigan then splits his forces in two directions. One set head off in search of Alina, while Nina's whereabouts prompt a search party to head out for them. Nina is still alive, having survived the shipwreck thanks to a floating wooden board. This certainly isn't like Titanic though, and the pair share their board and make it to shore. Together they make it to a hut up in the mountains and get close together to keep warm. In the middle of the night, Matthias awakens and immediately pulls away. As the two verbally duel over the differences in their respective towns, Matthias laughs at the prospect of a woman besting him. It's a clever conversation, one that sees the pair growing closer together while establishing the power dynamic. In fact, Matthias even admits that he likes Nina. Only, he's not sure whether he should trust his feelings or not, especially given she's a Grisha. When the ice falls away outside, Matthias makes a big decision and saves Nina from certain doom. Meanwhile, Alina wakens from her trunk to find Kaz, Inij, and Jesper waiting for her. After a bit of a light show, she takes off. There in Rivest, East Ravka, and Alina finds herself evading both Kaz and the authorities. As she scrambles into the woods, she runs straight into Mal as the pair are reunited. Once together, Mal and Alina talk about their journey to this point. Mal admits he's found the mythical stag out in the forest, to which Alina replies that Kirigan has stolen her journal. As they hug and finally catch up, the pair shyly pull away and decide to find some shelter. Back in town, Kirigan catches up with Kaz and the gang. Ivan heads into a room where numerous sheets are hanging up. Jesper is there already, and he uses his marksman skills to outsmart Ivan. At the same time, Inij fights against a squaller, eventually stabbing her in the gut, while Zoya goes hunting for Kaz. Unfortunately, Kirigan finds Kaz instead and immediately conjures forth his shadow powers. Thankfully, Kaz manages to blind him with his trickery, taking off down the back alleys before being sliced to bits. In the morning, Alina and Mal decide to work together and find the mythical stag before Kirigan does. Episode 7 of Shadow and Bone begins in the past with Kirigan riding to find a Grisha called Luda. With Bagra leading the other Grisha to a sanctuary, soldiers surround Kirigan and Luda. Unfortunately, this results in Luda's death. This conjures forth a blinding rage in Kirigan, unleashing a slice of shadowy power that cuts the soldiers in half. With Luda cradled under his arms, Kirigan hurries to the Grisha sanctuary. Bagra forbids his plans to create the fold, but the future general refuses to listen. With numerous journals in hand, he begins to learn how to strike back and create an army. Bells toll ominously outside, snatching up Kirigan from his thoughts. He steps outside and finds himself surrounded on orders of the king. Heading out alone, Kirigan uses his shadow powers, which in turn creates the shadow fold. Back in the present, Kirigan leads his party out into the frozen tundra, tracking Mal and Alina. Meanwhile, Kaz decides the group should cut their losses and ponders whether to go back home. This certainly doesn't sit well with Inij though, especially given her past. Meanwhile, Alina and Mal find the mythical stag out in the woods. Instead of shooting though, Alina decides to get closer. She eventually touches the nose of this creature and looks set to take its power. Only, Kirigan and his men show up and attack. In the ensuing skirmish, the stag is shot as is Mal. General Kirigan finally shows up and looks set to hit Mal with shadow powers. Thankfully, Alina manages to produce a dazzling light barrier to protect them. Unfortunately, Alina loses the barrier in favor of trying to save Mal. Kirigan immediately goes on the offensive, cutting the head off this mythical stag. Kirigan holds Alina captive and reveals that he intends to siphon off her power into him. With parts of the deer held between them, Kirigan uses David to create a bridge between the pair. Now he can use her powers. This certainly doesn't bode well for the future, as the group ride to the first camp. Whilst there, Alina finds herself in the company of Genya. She confirms the king has been taken ill, while the queen is in isolation. Unfortunately, she too is a spy, revealing herself to be working for Kirigan all this time. She was also the reason Mao's letters never reach their intended destination. While they talk, Kirigan arrives before Mao. He antagonizes the soldier, telling him he read their letters. Kirigan intends to use patience and time to his advantage, waiting for Alina to come to him. He doesn't intend to kill Mao though, he's instead going to let time do that itself. Well, Mao isn't waiting around that long. He uses his wits to entice a goat over and breaks free from his restraints. With his guard asleep, Mao slips away. When Kirigan finds out, he gives Ivan and the others strict instructions to put Mao down if he gets near Alina. Meanwhile, Inaj says her goodbyes to Kaz, who admits that he'll do everything he can to make sure she doesn't return to Helene. Together with Jesper, they prepare to head back across the fold. Only, this will mean getting a skiff across to the other side. Hiding in plain sight, they abandon capturing Alina and head back home. With papers and disguises, the trio blend into the First Army ranks and prepare to board the skiff. Mao too is on board, hiding in the cabins below. Kaz, Jesper and Inaj blend in, realizing that they're going in completely exposed this time. As the vessel leaves the dock, the series lends itself nicely to the season finale. Episode 8 of Shadow and Bone begins inside the fold. Darkness consumes the group as they prepare for the inevitable. They've passed 5 markers and thus far no Volcra have attacked. Down in the cabins, Jesper, Kaz and Inaj also prepare for what's to come. Unfortunately, Jesper doesn't have anywhere near enough bullets. Meanwhile, Nina and Matthias make it into Arkisk. The pair try to work out whether there's somewhere they can go together where they're no longer witch and witch-hunter. With the threat of being court-martialed and deserted, Matthias tries to push this to the back of his mind, while they sit downstairs and eat waffles. Only, Matthias suddenly collapses on the table. A Grisha shows from the distance, a man known as Fedor. He immediately takes Matthias and holds him captive. This obviously causes any trust between him and Nina to shatter, despite her pleas that this was the only way to save him. He's en route to Hell's Gate 2, where he'll be a prisoner. This just so happens to be in the town of Ketterdam. Back inside the fold, Alina uses her powers to blast a way forward. Only, it's a small tunnel, one that's nowhere near big enough to destroy the fold. It turns out this was never the plan for Kirigan, as he wants to use the darkness as a weapon, with Alina used as a tool. Down in the cabins, Kaz and the others find a stowaway. It's Mao. He too wants to kill the general, and this makes him an ally in their fight. The boat suddenly stops though as Kirigan demonstrates his power. He uses the darkness and pushes the fold out, consuming East Ravka. He tells the men and women on board the skiff that their fight is over, they can redraw maps and change the world as they see fit. Mao suddenly bursts out the crowd with a gun, intent on shooting Kirigan. Unfortunately, he's stopped and forced down to the ground by the Grisha. Once there, Alina tries her best to control the light, but it's too much. Kaz and the others show too, managing to strike Kirigan, but realizing it's too late, and Kirigan is far too powerful. As the Volcra begin to attack, Alina reaches forward for Mao. Only, the mythical stag suddenly appears before her. Now realizing what she needs to do, she grabs the knife on the ground and plunges it into Kirigan's hand. With the connection between them broken, Alina uses her powers to push the darkness back. Kirigan is confused, but as Alina explains, the stag chose her, not him. Mao knocks the black general off the skiff and attacks, hitting the man with a barrage of bullets. Volcra swoops down and grabs Kirigan, knocking him back as it seems they're feasting on him. Mao makes it back on board the skiff to find Alina passed out. She eventually awakens, allowing them to move the skiff forward and leave the fold. Together, the group reconvene out in the frosty fields. Kaz realizes how valuable the Sun Summoner is and tries to work out whether to hand her in or not. Well, a valuable treasure is enough to persuade Kaz otherwise. Alina looks back toward the fold, knowing this fight is far from over. With Kirigan having turned against his own people, it leaves the fate of the world a big unknown at his point. Saints become martyrs before they become heroes. Kaz and the gang decide to get a boat to Ketterdam. The vessel they choose to take? the same one Matthias happens to be held captive on. As they talk about their plan, Nina happens to be listening from afar. Mal and Alina decide to team up and stick together, determined to take the fold down. Only, there's a problem. The Darkling is not dead. As we cut across to Kirigan, we see him leave the fold and issue a command for the Volcra to follow. The theory of last episode. Shadow and Bone bows out its first season with an enthralling finale, one that leaves the door wide open for additional seasons to come. The season has essentially been about Alina gaining her powers, while Kirigan has tried to control her. The reveals about him being the Dark Heretic and Bagra being his mother are by far the most surprising twists in the series, though. This whole balance between light and dark has been nicely realized, and the ending seems to hint that Kirigan is now more dangerous than ever. Elsewhere, Nina and Matthias's story seems to have hit a bit of a snag, and in many ways, has played second fiddle to everything else going on. While there has been some crossover with the other two storylines, ultimately this feels like a plot restrained for another season. Kaz and his troupe have crossed paths with Alina several times this season, and the story beats have always been quite similar: plan a heist, execute the heist, lose Alina, etc. But the ending does allow for some good character development, and a ploy to break free from this. With East Ravka in ruins, at least based on that ending it seems, and Kaz heading off on a different quest this time, the big conflict between Alina and Kirigan is far from over. The reveal that this man has seemingly raised a shadow army and is preparing to attack certainly looks like bad news for our characters. In the meantime, the ending leaves the door wide open for more seasons to come. Let's just hope Netflix renew this one sooner rather than later. Shadow and Bone is fantasy done right. Netflix's latest original is a fantastic, exciting, well-written series that manages to adapt its source material to the small screen in the best way possible. Based on the popular Grishaverse novels by Leigh Bardugo, Shadow and Bone essentially adapts the first novel, while taking elements of its Six of Crows follow-up. The result is a wonderful medley of influences that deliver 8 episodes of enthralling action and consistently interesting world building. Shadow and Bone, though, takes place in a relatively small chunk of a much larger world. Specifically, our tale predominantly takes place in the divided country of Ravka. A large shadowy wall, known colloquially here as the Fold, divides the country in half, towering over everything like the ice wall from Game of Thrones. Its origins are steeped in mystery, but across the season we do find out where it came from and why. This fantasy world also plays host to a number of superpowered beings known as Grisha. Their powers range from detecting heartbeats and throwing fireballs, right the way through to light and dark projections. With these two continents divided, the focus shifts across both sides of the Fold into both East and West Ravka. In East Ravka, cartographer Alina joins her best friend Mal on the front lines. Unfortunately, Mal is tasked with a perilous recon mission through the Fold. Alina follows, though, and in doing so inadvertently shows off her mysterious powers. You see, Alina is the fabled Sun Summoner, a Grisha so rare and powerful that they could change the fate of the world. Sensing this could change everything, General Kirigan takes Alina to the capital city to train her up. Mal is left behind, though, eventually doing everything he can to get back to his best friend. Complicating matters further are a rogue band of misfits in West Ravka. This is where the Six of Crows story comes into play. At the center of this is gang leader Kaz Brecker, who learns of a lucrative job worth 1 million kruj. The only trouble is, he'll need to cross the Fold into East Ravka. This leads him to team up with charismatic gunslinger Jesper and the intriguingly complicated spy Inage. Together, they set out to find and capture Alina. These two stories are then joined by a third, where Grishanina is captured by an elite Fjordan, Witchinter soldier named Matthias. Interestingly, each of these separate subplots do cross paths at random intervals, with episode 5 in particular seeing all 3 of these plotlines converging together in the best way possible. These reunions are short-lived, though, especially as the story branches further later on, with Mal given his own subplot to contend with as well. Fans of The Witcher will notice immediately similarities between the two shows, especially with the way these separate story threads are woven together. No spoilers, of course, but a few of these episodes have some lovely twists and turns that keep things exciting. On their own, these plot lines are actually quite archetypal. Alina finds herself on the well-worn path to becoming the young adult chosen one. Kaz and the gang take part in numerous heists. While further still, Matthias and Nina play off the forbidden love angle. However, bringing them together in the manner they are here with some rich history and world building to boot, gives the series a sense of freshness lacking in recent fantasy offerings. There are moments of confusion, especially early on as the scenes jump between both sides of the fold. However, the cast here do a fantastic job to keep things engaging throughout. There's just enough of a comedic angle without falling into cheesy or cringy territory. There's just enough action to keep things tense and suspenseful. And there's enough intrigue between the characters to keep things engaged. Too often in these shows the antagonists fall short and end up as cartoony caricatures. While the whole taking over the world crutch is still here, it's woven through a tragic backstory of loss and pain that makes the villain a lot more interesting than newcomers may be expecting. No spoilers here of course, but while many people will figure out the antagonist early on, their motivations are nicely realized. Shadow and Bone is a beautifully written adaptation and one armed with a really solid soundtrack too. In fact, the musical score Joseph Trapanese has crafted here is beautifully laid out across this world and really helps this one stand out. While there is a cliffhanger ending, Shadow and Bone makes the 8-episode journey to reach that point worth every second. There's some excellent world building, and the characters are consistently engaging. The plots may be a little generic, but everything around that layers this show with a sugary sweetness that will leave you longing for more. Shadow and Bone is not just the best fantasy series of the year, it's the best Netflix original since The Queen's Gambit.